And just a few of the normal housekeeping items that we have. I want to remind everyone that to please mute their microphones if they are not the active speaker. That way we can prevent echoes and feedback from happening. Can make communication much clearer throughout the evening. I'll go over the agenda briefly. We'll start off with the administrative items, the adoption of the October meeting minutes. And the agenda I'd sent out, we'd had an item to discuss the December meeting schedule. I don't think we actually will need to do that anymore. We'll only plan on having the normal Tuesday, third Tuesday meeting in December, which is December the 15th.
And that's a change from when you and I spoke.
It is.
You want to explain that, or you want to do the minutes first?
Yeah, we'll do the minutes first, then
Let's do the minutes, then we can just discuss, because maybe we should discuss that and just the general plot for any upcoming meetings.
Yeah,
as you and I had discussed. So,
did
you notice that I had sent you something about an hour ago, a slight change to the minutes, and I see that Paul sent you something too. Have you?
I did. I haven't had the chance to review them yet, but I did see that you sent those emails.
Okay.
And so then following the administrative items, we'll have a lengthy transportation analysis discussion covering a few different topics. Then following that, kind of a general Q&A and comment session. I do want to actually leave time for about 5 minutes after the admin items, just as we've done for the last few meetings, for folks to leave comments or questions, members of the public who aren't on the task force and who aren't able to stay for the entirety of the meeting. Once we get to that point, I'll explain how people can raise their hands and participate. But we can go ahead and start with the minutes if you'd like to take care of that.
Okay, what should we do about the couple of suggested changes?
Has everyone in the task force?
Nobody would have seen mine because I just sent it to you.
In that case, if you'd like, I can incorporate your changes and send them out to the task force. And if anybody has by email, and if anybody has a objection to any of them, then we could raise them. They could raise them that way. Does that work?
It might. I don't know if Paul sent his to everybody or not.
I did.
You did? Okay. I probably should have done the same thing. Mine I can deal with very quickly if you want, which is there was an item where there was a reference to on the fourth page, I think, or something, the fourth paragraph, that we were talking about development by right. And I think there was a misstatement in there. I made a statement about as an example of, like, if you had an R4 situation, what that would entitle you to. And there's a statement attributed to John Oldfolder in there that seems to suggest that that R4 is the development, is the zoning right now for the WMATA plot. And I'm sure that can't be right.
No, that's not accurate.
So okay. I'm not sure. I know John was elaborating on my explanation of by right. So
okay.
I can, if you want, I can make a suggestion change or something.
I can make a clarifying edit to that.
Okay, all right. That's all I had. And Paul, I don't know about you.
I mean, I think my comments are fairly self-explanatory. There were three. One in which I rewrote the reference to my comments to more clearly reflect my intent. The second was just a minor one, just to put the word pool in there. And the third was a request that rather than have me change the October minutes, to have my November 11th email and the resolution of the board of directors of the village included in the November minutes.
I guess my feeling about it is that if people are right with just making those changes, we could just go ahead and approve them. Does anybody?
Can I have a question?
Cheryl, sure.
When you guys write the minutes, do you go back to the recordings to find out the words or not?
For some of the more recent meetings that we have recordings of, yes, we
Like,
have.
I have no problem with what Paul wants to change, but if you actually took his comments from recordings as opposed to what he may remember, I mean, you see what I'm saying?
The minutes
if
we
you'd
write
like-
aren't necessarily verbatim, though. So, it's otherwise they'd be a little more extensive than they are. So, in some sense, they're condensed to try and be reflective of the discussion that happened.
Okay, so since you didn't try to reflect Paul's comments exactly, and he has some changes, I have no problem with his changes.
Okay, and I can go back actually. I'll try to send you some clarification, Brian, for that one statement. But rather than spend a lot of time on that, with those, clarifications, can we just approve the minutes just by anyone objecting to it saying nay or raising an objection? Hearing none, let's consider the minutes approved.
All right, and then moving on to the discussion about the December meetings. David, you and I the other day had discussed a potential second December meeting.
Right.
And that was with the intent of having the task force discuss the plan amendment text. We're kind of in the final stages of finishing the draft plan amendment text on our side, but there's kind of a few things we want to be cognizant of moving into December. One is giving the task force enough time to review the draft before we meet to discuss it. And the other is, not scheduling meetings so late into the month that it's kind of interfering, it's getting into people's holidays if they are taking holidays this year. And so, given that, it seems like with kind of our internal timelines with the draft plan amendment text, which we were originally hoping to provide to you all tonight, but I think it may be just a couple more weeks on our end, that it wouldn't provide the task force with enough time prior to an early December meeting to give the text a proper review. So for that reason, I think at this point perhaps a little uncertain on our end, but I think we were expecting maybe 2 January meetings, and we can discuss the dates that are okay with people on the task force next month, if that's preferable at the December meeting.
It's all right with me. Does anybody have a problem with delaying that long to discuss it?
So in December, we're going to discuss the date for the January meeting. Am I getting that right?
Well, we'd like to have 2 meetings in January with
Yeah.
when we're
One in
reviewing.
December, which remains on what, the 15th, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and then on that day, we will discuss a date in January.
That's right. Well,
Okay.
we're still planning on having the I believe it's the January 19th meeting.
Yes.
Regularly scheduled, yes, okay.
Just when reviewing some of the plan amendment text, it's better if we can have a couple of meetings closer to each other, so that so people don't necessarily forget the details of the previous meeting.
Okay, thanks.
It sounds okay to me. Nobody else seems to have an issue. I don't see any hands up, or I think we can then move on if you want.
Okay. And with that, I will, as I promised, we have a 5-minute public comment Q&A session for any members of the public that are in attendance who are unable to stay until the end. I will say if your comments are related to transportation or your questions are related to transportation, we are going to have an evening full of transportation discussions and Q&A. So your question may be answered later on in the evening. So I would encourage you to hold off on any transportation related questions until the end of the meeting. And with that being said, if you have a question, you can raise your hand by opening up the participants window. It should be on the bottom right of your screen, I believe. It looks like a silhouette of a person with 3 little bars next to it. you open that up on the bottom right, I believe you should see a box with a hand on it. You can click that to raise your hand, and I will be able to recognize you. Zach Burstein, you are unmuted. You can speak now.
Hi, this is Zach. I am the president of the HOA of the Villages, which is basically one of the adjoining properties with Paul and Chris and a few others here. I will try to stay to the end, though I can't promise with familiar commitments. So in some of our monthly meetings with the HOA, we recently had a great presentation, and there were a lot of concerns around the height of the Virginia Tech building. We have, as sure Paul has let you know, submitted like a formal feedback on it, but there's a lot of concern around the height, especially the one closest to the property. And we were hoping that we could find a happy medium, which still allows some development, but also is less of an eyesore for the residents who live so close to the property. So that was the biggest concern. There's also a fair amount of discussion around traffic and impact on the schools. So I think we'd love some more clarity there. But I did want to just share some of the concerns from both myself and then the 100 members who will be probably most directly impacted in this project. I'm new to this, so I don't know if I did that right or I missed things.
No, thank you, Zach. Appreciate your comments. We'll certainly take them into account going forward, and there's still discussion to be had regarding the plan and the text. So I encourage you to, keep coming to the meetings in December and January. We'll be discussing, some of the items that you just mentioned, and how the plan amendment can address those.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. And Lauren May, I see you have your hand up. You're unmuted.
Yes, I'm a resident of the village that Zach just referred to, and I also want to express my concern, especially about the size and the location of the residential building proposed for the Virginia Tech site. I would like to think that it could be located so it's not huge and looming over us. I mean, we're going to have a lot more traffic. We're going to have a lot more noise. We're going to have a lot more people. And I accept we will be living in more of a fishbowl than our peaceful community now. But if that one thing could happen, I think it would alleviate a lot of the concerns of the people who live here. And I also will try to stay to the end.
Thank you, Lauren. All right. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Angela Dinkle?
Yes. Good evening. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Yeah, I second Lauren's. I agree with Lauren 100%. I think there should be the size limit of the building. And like she said, it's going to be a fishbowl, and right now it's a really peaceful community. So I go along with that as well. Thank you. And I'm going to stay till the end too.
All right. Thank you, Angela. And I think that's probably our 5 minutes. For those of you that raised your hands, if you wouldn't mind clicking the raise hand button again, just so you can put it down. It looks like you may still have a question. All right, moving on. Bob, should I make you the presenter?
Either that or let me share the screen. I see.
Okay, you should be able to share the screen. All right, I'm passing it off to Bob Pecora with the Fairfax County Department of Transportation.
Hey. Is everyone seeing my screen? Got it? Yeah,
We can see
I
it.
see it.
you can see it. Okay, good to go. All right, thank you. Thanks for having us again for another discussion about the West Falls Church project. This is the transportation focused discussion. And, oh, there we are. Let's get that out. Okay. So I'm Bob Gore with Fairfax County Department of Transportation. You know that. I've been here before. I have with me tonight Steve Knutson from our Residential Traffic Administration Program, Chris Wells from our Pedestrian and Bicycle Planning Team, Tim Kutz, who's also on Transportation Planning. He's going to speak to us about the West Falls Church Pedestrian and Bicycle Plan effort. This is the debut of that presentation tonight. And then also have Mike Garcia and Greg Steverson also from FCDOT. They'll be here just in case we need some other questions answered and such, but they'll be on and monitoring the presentation tonight. So with that, let's see. Oops, there we go. So tonight we'll talk about the Residential Traffic Administration Program. We've heard about some of the concerns that you have from the neighborhoods around the West Falls Church project area. We've also heard from you that you're looking for bicycle and pedestrian, what we're doing for bicycle and pedestrian connections. And so we have two presenters for that. And then we'll get into the meat of the discussion. This is the traffic impact analysis, the WMATA and Virginia Tech sites. They do have their TIA, traffic impact statement, traffic impact analysis that they submitted to VDOT for review. We do have VDOT comments. We have actually preliminary comments from VDOT as well as from FCDOT from the review that I did, so I'll be able to discuss that. And after each of these sections, we'll actually have a small Q&A session, except for the big traffic impact analysis, where we'll open it up for a longer discussion about any topic related to transportation tonight. So this is the plan that we've seen from Evans Group. EYA has presented this slide to us. It shows the three projects. WMATA location here, where it's proposed on the concept. I'm not sure if you can see my screen. It's green. Very sensitive mouse. The WMATA site, Virginia Tech in the middle, and the City of Falls Church project site. The boundary of between the city and the county is shown in the heavy black line. And then we also have the proposed ramp construction on I-66, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the discussion tonight. So there's going to be, I probably will mention a lot of terms and acronyms in here, so I wanted to give you all a list of all the types of acronyms I might be using tonight, or you might hear tonight. So some of these you've heard before, like the VDOT and FCDOT, but there's also like Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, the Institute of Transportation Engineers, RTAP, I've mentioned before, TIAs, you know what that is. Getting into more of the modeling, the MWCOG or synchro modeling. So that might come up in discussion, but I just want to give you a list of all the terms that may be used and what they mean. And when you see this presentation again after that's on the website, you'll be able to recall as well what these are. So on the first presentation, since we heard from the neighborhood surrounding the West Falls Church, I'm going to call it the West Falls Church, WMATA, and Virginia Tech project site, that there's some concerns about traffic mitigation in the neighborhoods. There are some projects that are mitigations are underway right now through studies, but I'd like to have Steve Knutson just discuss this program in general and what this has, and then right after that we'll have a few minutes for a Q&A if you have any questions about that. Steve, are you online? Brian, you might have to unmute him if he is, or he might be calling in. So.
He should have the ability to unmute himself. It's showing he's unmuted.
Yeah, it looks like he's calling in right now.
Oh, okay. Just a moment then. Yes, we can see him making the call right now. So. As we're waiting for Steve, I see a number of comments are coming in on the chat box. If you'd like, can you put those? We'll try to answer them at the chat box, but you can also put them in the question box. So I'll answer one. The Nancy McFalls, you had asked what is surrounding, just abutting, is it within 2 mile radius? Yeah, Steve is going to talk about the area around the CBC, so he may also touch on the neighborhoods outside of the 66 project, or on the other side of the 66 project. I'm not sure if Steve's able to get on yet.
He needs a new.
So he said he was going to call in, so we might have to skip and then go on to. Oh, Steve, are you there? Steve?
Hey,
Still? Yeah, we might have to skip forward.
Bob, can you kind of briefly just talk over his stuff, and then if he gets in, then he can kind of elaborate further?
Yes, I can do that. So, okay, so the residential traffic administration program. This is the program that looks at working with the neighborhoods in any neighborhood. They're looking at anything that is that residents feel that there is like a speeding problem, or there might be cut-through traffic in their neighborhoods. This program, once initiated through the supervisor's office, we'll look at doing a neighborhood traffic study, and then look to see what qualifications might occur for any kind of mitigation that looks at truck traffic, like I said, the traffic calming, watch for children signs, or if there's a need for a additional fine for speeding. So there's a number of neighborhoods around the area that have active programs, and I'll get to those as well. And so the traffic calming program itself, they're looking at decreasing, let's say if that's for speeding, decreasing vehicle speeds or enhancing residential roadways. They're trying to look for making those safer for all users. This has been ongoing with the county for a number of years, and they have a few hundred projects in the area, in the county. And these measures may actually look at speed humps, speed tables, crosswalks, chokers. Steve, do I hear your voice? No, I don't hear his voice yet. And raised. Oh, there he is.
I'm on.
Okay. So your presentation's midstream. Uh-oh. I'll mute myself. Yeah, let me mute.
Yeah, I've muted myself on the program.
Well, maybe I'll continue with the presentation. No, we can't hear you, Steve.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
But it's very echoey, isn't it?
Steve, I think you may want to mute the, if you have your computer speakers on, you may want to mute those and only use your phone.
Yeah, the computer speakers are muted and the program's muted.
Okay.
You're good
Is
now.
that any better?
You're good now.
Okay, Bob, so where'd you leave off? So I guess I'll just jump right in here if you are able to hear me. So the traffic calming program is used to basically lower the operating speeds on residential roadways throughout the county. This kind of brings about a safer environment for all users. To date, we've installed about 200 projects throughout the county, and basically this entails the use of the placement of physical measures such as speed humps, speed tables, raised crosswalks, chokers, and raised medians. Bob, do you want to advance the screen? And so the traffic calming program has 5 steps that a road would need to go through to achieve measures being placed on that road. Basically, they are, the first step is the project initiation. The second step is the plan development. The third step is the community engagement. The fourth step is the ballot phase. And then the fifth step is the project installation. Bob, if you want to go ahead and advance it. And so our current projects throughout the county are in this general area are Barber Road, Pine Castle Road, Chestnut Street, Gordon's Road, and Highland Avenue. They're all at various stages throughout the process, and we're currently actively working on all 5 of these roads. And that's basically the suite of programs that we have to address traffic issues on residential roadways and the current projects that are active in this area. So if people wish to ask any questions, we can go ahead and answer them.
Paul, I saw you had raised your hand.
So, I would, I don't think this has come as a surprise because we talked about it briefly before. I find this process to be problematic. And, so if you walk from the Villages down Haycock, and then turn right on Great Falls, and then you go on Kaysmont, and then go to Beacon, you're going to see the problem with what's going to happen in this project, study or no study. And in fact, you can see it even in the picture you put up. The picture you put up has a sidewalk on it, right? The sidewalk is what you have as a precedent to these traffic calming studies. If anyone has a question about the danger that this project is going to put people in, I suggest they take that route that I just described during the time when school is, I'm talking on foot, when school is and children are walking to school, or during rush hour in particular, particularly at this time of year, when it's dark and there's no sidewalk, and you're going to be putting attractions up that will induce people from these neighborhoods to walk there, especially children. I've done it a few times myself. It's not pleasant. It's dangerous as it is. And you can talk about studies and whatever, but if you just take the common sense of trying that walk, you will see that people are in danger now, and you're going to put them in even further danger when you have this attraction there. So I don't view that necessarily as a problem of the developers. It seems that Fairfax County has been remiss for decades in assuring the adequate safety of pedestrians in this area. But even if it's not their fault, the fault of the developers, if you're going to increase the likely foot traffic at dangerous times when at the same time traffic is increased, that Fairfax County, before it talks about traffic calming, has to do what's in this picture and put in a sidewalk in those areas so that people won't get run over by a car.
So I do believe that we have a presentation on bike and pedestrian facilities following this. So perhaps some of those issues can be addressed during that presentation.
Okay, thank you.
So if we do have any other questions, regarding the traffic calming program, we can go ahead and answer them now, or wait until the end of the presentation and just take them in the general Q&A.
Yeah, I am not seeing any other hands raised from the task force. David?
Yeah, just a quick comment. I know Bob and Brian and I discussed this on the phone the other day, setting up the agenda. As a practical matter, what potential do you see for in the developments immediately affected by this project for traffic calming measures? By which I mean, on the task force, we've got 5 communities represented. The villages and the pavilion and the gates of West Falls are self-contained, and I doubt they have traffic calming problems because nobody is going through there. As you know, we have our problem in Ellison Heights, Mount Danny with Highland, and as you say, something's going on now. I could see maybe something else cutting through there. That only really leaves Lemon Road area, and I don't know. Again, the main road anybody would cut through, or where you'd expect traffic to increase would be Idlewood. Does Idlewood even qualify in terms of the type of street it is for traffic calming measures?
So we've studied Idlewood a few times, and they've received some of the measures. I believe that they have like the $200 fine signs, and we just installed some Watch for Children signs. Unfortunately, their volume, we have a volume qualifier, and we do have a top end on that volume, and they always exceed the top end. So we're not really able to introduce physical measures on Idlewood Road for that purpose.
I'm sorry, can you explain what you mean by exceeding the top end? You mean they're over the, I would have thought, go ahead.
Yeah, David, they're over the top end. So, we need to see between 500 and 6,000 trips in a 24-hour period. And I think, if I remember correctly, they're closer to 9,000 to 10,000 trips in a day. So, the state regulations has like a top end on how many vehicles can be traveling on a road and still qualify for the program. I believe at the state level it's like 4,000 trips a day, and we've pushed that out to 6,000 just to try to bring in a few other streets that do have high volume levels. Unfortunately, Idlewood, every time we've studied it, which is, quite a few times over the past few years, they've exceeded that upper volume.
Okay, I thank you for clarifying, Steve, because I didn't know there was an upper limit. And the purpose, just briefly, behind imposing an upper limit is what? There's too much traffic to make it practical to put in anything? Is that it?
I believe that was the intent, yes. That there's, too much traffic, and they were concerned what the consequences of lowering or impeding the operation of vehicles when it exceeds a certain volume.
Okay, thank you very much.
Steve, can you also just quickly mention that your program works with VDOT closely because VDOT does maintain the roads here. So some of those qualifiers are for VDOT standards.
Yeah, so I mean, our program is basically state placed or worked off of the state policy. We've modified some of the criteria where we could, but most of it is pretty reflective of what is done at the state level. We do have to, adhere to the requirements that we put in place, or the qualifiers that we've put in place, and the changes that we have made that are a little bit different or maybe a little inconsistent with what they do at the state level have basically been, approved or reviewed by them before we made the changes. So, if we are looking at modifying our, qualifying criteria, things of that nature, we definitely need approval from the state at some point before we can actually put those into action or put them into place. Does that answer what you're asking, Bob?
Yes, I think I just wanted to have an understanding from it, and as well as for the folks that are on this call.
I have my hand raised. This is Stephanie. My hand is raised.
Go ahead, Frank.
So when you say you must get approval from the state, where exactly is that in the state? Is it this legislative body? Is it the executive office of the governor? Is it somebody at VDOT? Who actually sets in place those upper limits that prioritize vehicles over human bodies? Like, where does that change? How does that get changed?
So, I mean, it is a state level policy that's kind of administered by VDOT. So if we were to make changes, we generally go through the local VDOT office, through their traffic engineering group, to make sure that we're still kind of adhering to or working within the confines of their policy, just to make sure that once we are working in VDOT right away, so we have to do things in accordance to what they approve. And once the measures are put in place, they take on the maintenance of those measures. So, after they are installed, we do pay for them from the county. They do become a VDOT asset. So it has to, meet their criteria, not only in the physical nature of the device being installed, but how the process was worked to put them into place.
But my question goes to establishing the guidelines in the first place or changing them. And I still don't know who VDOT is. What would one do? As soon as it's snow day and wanted to do something, what windmill would you tilt at? That's my question.
I mean, I would assume that you would want to start with, your state representatives to see if they would like or know how that changes could be made at the state level to the various programs. I would think that they would probably be your best resource to approach this.
Our state representatives, legislators, and senators. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, that's how I would do it. I mean, you can, approach the local county supervisor, but at some point it's probably going to have to go through, it would have to go through, some legislative request probably that might be, more helpful to, make any kind of amendments or changes.
Okay, thanks. Okay.
Are there any more questions for Steve Knudsen and RTAP? Okay, don't hear any, so I will move on. So the next discussion was kind of like what Paul was asking about pedestrians and sidewalks and such. So I'd like to have Chris Wells come online and we can talk about the active Fairfax transportation plan. This effort is to update the bike and trails master plans that the county has, and this will be a countywide effort. I'd like to have him just talk about it in the overview, where the process is, and then also what the steps are. Tim Kutz, right after this, will talk about what we're planning to do to work with you all about the West Falls Church pedestrian and bicyclist active plan. So, Chris, are you online?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I will advance the slides when you are ready.
Okay, great. First, let me just go ahead and introduce myself and, based on the previous comments, make some background statements. So the pedestrian program was created by the Board of Supervisors in 2002, and the bicycle program was created in 2006. The pedestrian program in particular was created in response to pedestrian fatalities. In 2002, we were having about 20 pedestrian fatalities a year. So I've been in charge of that program from the very beginning. From a staff point of view, the Board of Supervisors is in charge. But the challenges are great. And I heard the previous comments, and I am certainly sensitive to that. You know, in the public relations number is that between fiscal year 2002 and fiscal year 2025, so over 23 fiscal years, the board has prioritized or allocated a combination of federal, state, and local funding of $536 million to build pedestrian, bicycle, and bus stop projects. And while that is more than any of the other regional jurisdictions around here, it is unfortunately still far short of the needs in this county. I receive about a sidewalk or a crosswalk request a week, if not more than one a week, now that everyone's out walking and biking in the pandemic. So the costs for us to build projects have increased over the years. It's currently about $500 to $2,000 a linear foot. So that's equivalent to about 4 million to 10 million a mile. So for instance, you know, in this general area, we've added crosswalks at Great Falls and Haycock, and Westmoreland and Haycock, and the Great Falls sidewalk is recently completed, sidewalks in Kirby, so on and so forth. But if you consider that sidewalk on Great Falls costs, you know, multiple $1 million, you can see the challenge that the county has in addressing a county that is almost 300 years old, 400 square miles, and has a lot of development that occurred in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s when sidewalks were not required of development like it is today. So one of our biggest challenges is retrofitting infrastructure in these areas, such as where we're talking about tonight, the West Falls Church area. And it's not just the monetary challenges, it's the lack of right-of-way. So for all of that walking route that you described, those are people's front yards. And when we go to build projects, quite often, those people tell us that they do not want us to take 15 feet of their front yard and tell us to go away. And so I'm not trying to minimize the issue. The issue is literally deadly serious, and we know this. But the challenges are great. The county, the Board of Supervisors has done a decent job of responding to the needs. If you look at our funding over the years, somewhere between 10 to 15% of our transportation funding has directly gone to pedestrian, bicycle, and bus stop projects. For instance, we've literally improved 500 bus stops throughout the county that used to just be muddy grass, sticks in the dirt. But that's still not enough, and it sounds like a small portion of our transportation funding, but when you consider that most of our residents drive cars as their primary form of transportation, it's actually higher than our mode split, higher than if you were to just allocate funding based on how many people actually walk and bike. So the board is moving in the direction and has been moving in the direction of prioritizing walking and biking, prioritizing developments such as this that are walkable and bikeable so that people don't have to get in their cars, so that they can have this multimodal existence where you have transit, and in this case, high capacity transit. But the challenges remain, and the challenges that you described about increasing the attractiveness of a development area, which is what happens in all of these activity centers, are very real. And in Tyson's, for instance, we have one block that might be brand new and have people moving in, and then one block that is still not improved. And unfortunately, as you described, someone goes out for a walk their dog at night or whatever, and there's not lighting. There probably is a sidewalk, but it may, there may be not great facilities. So those are the challenges we face. We're moving in the right direction by moving towards these transit-oriented developments. The challenges is how we help the surrounding communities benefit from this this new shiny thing in the distance that they can't get to. So in this location, we have the interstate on one side, so that's a barrier, obviously. The City of Falls Church portion we don't control, but obviously the neighborhoods immediately opposite Haycock are old ditch section neighborhoods that don't have sidewalks. And so I guess that's a good news, bad news thing. The good news is those would be excellent candidates for future funding to be able to access the development that's occurring. The bad news is it's a giant county, and so I and the Board of Supervisors have this same issue everywhere in the county, where everyone would like a sidewalk. Everyone has challenges getting their kids to elementary school and so on and so forth. So it is a very serious issue. We do, it may sound empty to say we try our best, but the $500 million of funding is a significant amount of funding. But honestly, we need billions and billions and billions more if we were to build out, a complete sidewalk network on all of the roads. And the roads, for instance, that I mentioned in this area, these are arterials. That's where we've started in the past 20 years, just getting the sidewalks on the Kirby's and the Great Falls and the Idlewoods, which are the main roads. And the ability to get into the neighborhoods becomes even more challenging. One other thing we do is what I was asked to talk about tonight, and I'm sorry for digressing, but I thought it would help at least answer some of the questions or comments that were made earlier. And somebody needs to mute an ambulance or something. But one of the other things we do is we plan for the future, and part of the effort that is going on, of course, here is planning for the development, but then from a countywide perspective, we plan for a network of bicycle and pedestrian facilities. Fairfax was actually ahead of its time. The trails plan, which is the main, the longest standing planning document, was originally adopted in 1976, and it envisioned a countywide network of interconnected bicycle facilities. And that is very ahead of its time in Fairfax County. And it was simply what you would imagine, roads like Great Falls and Haycock and Shreve and Idlewood should have a trail or some sort of walking, biking facility about it. What we're doing now is combining two separate plans. So we've had this trails plan, as I said, since 1976. More recently, the bicycle master plan was adopted by the board in 2014. The trails plan has been updated over the years. But what that led to is two separate planning documents, where the bicycle master plan has one map and the countywide trails plan has another map, and they don't necessarily say the same thing. So that's been confusing for developers, confusing for even the county when it comes to implementing projects. What should we do? So we've, we've received funding from the board to update these plans, to consolidate them into something called the Active Fairfax Transportation Plan. Beyond the comprehensive plan level work that goes into merging these two plans, there's a couple important things that need to happen to help guide the future. One is a facility selection toolkit, where we know that things change over time. A new road is proposed that's not on any one of these maps. And so what would be the bicycle pedestrian recommendation for some future proposed road? Also, the facility selection toolkit would allow us to do context sensitive design. A standard VDOT trail is a 10-foot shared use path. And whereas a 10-foot shared use path is great along Route 7 between Tyson's and Reston, a 10-foot shared use path does not fit on Great Falls, but we would still like to be able to build a bicycle facility so that folks can get around in these short radius trips of a few miles at not on their car. Bicyclists also are changing, or our focus for bicyclists is changing. Traditionally, for 40 years in America, we've served the type A cyclist, the cyclist that feels comfortable riding in the road and riding with traffic. But what we know is that that's only a small percentage of people. Less than 5% of people feel comfortable riding in traffic in Fairfax County. What we also know is that there's a larger proportion, 50 to 60% of people who would actually be interested in riding a bike if it was safe. So what we're moving from is on-road bike lanes to off-road facilities. But as I said, there's not room for VDOT 10-foot paths everywhere. So our public facilities manual allows us to build 6-foot asphalt trails and 8-foot asphalt trails. And we intend to preserve that flexibility in this facilities selection toolkit so that we can build context-sensitive things. And then, as I said, with the needing to build in people's front yard comments, it allows us to minimize impacts to surrounding properties. The other thing that's new is a systematic safety action plan and a pedestrian plan. So whereas we as staff have been working on safety and pedestrian projects, there's never been a policy element other than saying people ought to be able to walk and bike that it gives us the endorsement of the Board of Supervisors that no, safety is job one and pedestrian issues are important. So, for instance, just the simple idea of having crosswalks on all 4 legs of a signalized intersection is one that we still today have to debate with VDOT on why we need them and how to make them work and how to fit. And we know that if a pedestrian comes to a corner and we're asking them to cross 3 legs of an intersection and wait for 3 different traffic signals and the delay that's associated with it, that's not going to happen. So we're working on this update. It'll again consolidate these plans, give us these policy guidance. We're working now on what we call phase 1, which we began last year and will wrap up in 2021. Then that'll move us into the more comprehensive plan intensive activities, which we call phase 2. Next slide, please. So there's a timeline. It goes over some of the things that goes into this. We're doing a policy and a plan audit. So the question earlier about what things at the state level or what things at the federal level or county level that needs to change. There are some state laws that needs to change. There's things like that. So we're doing a policy and plan audit. The existing conditions as described in the challenges of walking as part of this review. We are doing community engagement, but of course, because of the pandemic, that's going to be more virtual. We're also very interested in having community engagement with a broader swath of the population than we normally used to get from our meetings at elementary schools at night. We know that a large proportion of pedestrians are from economically challenged parts of the county where English is not the primary language. So it's beyond pedestrians and bicyclists being the most vulnerable road users. They're also often not able to be involved in our processes as we've traditionally done them. So a big part of our community engagement is focused on engaging these different parts of our society that we don't always hear from. So, for instance, we're going to have an equity advisory group and also a youth advisory group, because we know that pre-teenagers, for instance, and teenagers that don't own cars are very dependent on walking and biking and transit to support their family if they're in a working class situation, and that they have unique needs when it comes to walking and biking as well. So that will lead us to the board endorsement of goals and objectives, and again, ultimately in phase one, and move us into phase two, which is then putting this into the comprehensive plan language. So I think that's it. Bob, next slide. So with that, I gave some more background than I intended, but hopefully that helps with some of the questions, and I will take questions.
Paul, I saw you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I have my hand raised. I'm going to try to contain myself because, to be honest, what I've just heard is nonsense. Let's be clear what's going on here. We have a comprehensive plan that is put into place. We have a comprehensive plan that's put into place to allow for greater development. So on the one hand, Fairfax County is really eager to be getting the tax revenue from having more Starbucks and more houses, and I support all that. But on the other hand, Fairfax County comes like almost with a tin cup, saying we can't afford to build an infrastructure that will make that safe for people. It's as simple as that. If you cannot put the minimal safety in place so that school children walking to school or walking to see their friends are not going to be run over, then you should not be amending the comprehensive plan in a way that will put them in danger. And then you should wait to amend it until such time as this appropriate safety is in place. And I'm not one of those people who says that we have to have traffic for all time at the same level that we have to have it now. But I am one of those people who thinks that if you're going to put in hundreds of condominiums in an attractive area where there will be children who will walk to see their friends in some of the older neighborhoods, that there should be some reasonable chance that those kids won't be run over during rush hour. And I'd like to ask Mr. Wells what he would say to grieving parents whose children have been killed because you couldn't afford to put in a sidewalk when at the same time you are increasing the tax revenue and putting in a bunch of condominiums or houses where children will be.
Okay, well, Mr. Wells has had to speak to grieving parents of children who were killed, and it is a terrible thing. But Mr. Wells is not the one to answer about development activity in this county. I'm on the reactive side of this situation.
Well, that's the greatest description I've heard, the reactive side. That's what this whole process is. It's reactive. It's not thinking about what needs to be done in order to prevent a problem. And what we can see here very clearly is Fairfax County wants its revenue, but Fairfax County is not willing to deal with the safety and the cost in order to make that revenue safe for the people of Fairfax County. Because all these calming things we hear, those are low budget items. Putting in a sidewalk is a high budget item. And if you can't put in a sidewalk to keep people safe, then you shouldn't be doing the development that's going to increase the traffic. You've come here and given us a cookie cutter presentation without any reference to the fact that it is an input into deciding whether the comprehensive plan should be amended or not. And in that, you are doing everyone on this call and everyone in this community a major disservice.
So let me jump in really quickly. This is Greg Steverson. I'm Deputy Director with FCDOT. I just want to make sure that we all are clear about the various processes that go on here. What Chris is talking about is an overarching countywide plan for providing and planning for pedestrian and bicycle improvements in the county. We've also got, obviously, the comprehensive planning process, which is the part that's dealing with the land use that may occur, and quite frankly, the plan that goes in with respect to what needs to be done in order to provide, whether it's vehicular improvements or pedestrian improvements or bicycle improvements. So that's the overarching plan that says, here's how we propose to handle things if this development comes in. Then subsequent to that, there's the actual entitlement process, which the applicant, when they come in and say, hey, we want to do this actual thing, not, the land use is planned here, but nothing is happening. But when they actually come in and say, we're getting ready to provide a proposal of some sort, that's when the developer is responsible for whatever improvements that are needed with respect to the comprehensive plan and with respect to whatever their development is bringing in order to mitigate their impacts, whether it's vehicular impacts, whether it's pedestrian impacts, and all those things. So right now, this part, what Chris is talking about right now, is the overarching kind of plan for the county in order to provide the plan for pedestrian improvements. Some of these things will be addressed by development. Some of these things will have to be addressed by the county with respect to projects. We do sidewalk projects throughout the county, but Chris is right. It's not a situation where we have unlimited funds and can do unlimited projects. We do have to prioritize. We do have to work with the supervisor's office, work with, the folks in the area to provide these projects. But I just want to make sure that we're all talking about the same processes, the same issues, the same timeframes, so that we're not mixing apples and oranges. So
I'm sorry. What you are doing is lulling us into a sense of complacency by talking about a bunch of bureaucracy when the bottom line is that you don't have an infrastructure that will guarantee a reasonable level of safety to the people who are going to be affected by this. And I'm sorry, what it really comes down to is that Fairfax County wants its money, but doesn't want its expense.
I'm sorry you feel that way.
But it's not that I feel this way. You have actual knowledge. You don't even need to know. You don't even need to know a study to know that this is going to increase the amount of foot traffic. At the same time, it's going to increase the attraction, or what we call in old time law, you're creating an attractive nuisance. And there are no sidewalks. Now, I would encourage everyone who's throwing the process at me to walk along that route that I have talked about, from the Villages to Casemont to Beacon to Westmoreland at this time of night or at the time of night when there is rush hour, and tell me that you're not putting people in danger now, but also when you increase both the traffic of vehicles and foot traffic. I don't need a study to do that. And if Brian is keeping notes and there's a question about what I say, let me be really clear. I want this in the minutes. The County Board of Supervisors and the developers are, with knowledge, put in that word, those words, Brian, with knowledge, creating a nuisance which will increase the danger, and are not currently putting into place sufficient protection in the form of sidewalks to avoid that danger. You are acting with knowledge.
All right, thank you.
Are there any other questions, comments?
David, I saw that you.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I had my hand up, but I just had to take it down. Isn't that important?
Okay, Cheryl, go ahead.
I just had a quick one. Paul, we're here to keep the metro open. That's our goal. And we were explained tonight, we were told that sometimes sidewalks require a lot of individuals giving up their land. We have to figure some of that out, but I'm not sure if the route that you've identified, that children dying, has anything to do with the realities of what we're talking about here.
It is exactly the reality. Cheryl, I encourage you to take the walk that I described, because I have
go
taken
out
that walk.
every day and I walk these streets every
Have you
single
walked?
day.
Well, I'm sorry, it's putting people in danger. And if I want the metro open as much as anyone else, but we need to have a basic level of safety. I am not here saying that we shouldn't have a large amount of development. I am not saying that we should even be as concerned as others are about traffic, but there has to be a minimal level of safety in the general area in order to allow it. Now, you may think that
How do you get around people giving up their land?
Eminent domain. Eminent domain, Cheryl, there is something called eminent domain where private land is condemned for public use if it's necessary. And if that can't be done, then the level of development has to be adjusted accordingly. I don't want to have, I know, Cheryl, are you going to say here that people are not in danger walking around from Beacon and Casemont, even now before there's extra traffic going to the metro? Are you going to say that, Cheryl?
Paul, we have not even seen final plans. How can you state?
I don't need a plan. I don't need a plan to know. Just take a walk at rush hour and you'll see what's going on. I invite anyone to take a walk at rush hour and see what's going on.
Ryan,
Can
I have the floor here? So
sorry, but I'm going to. This is John Oldfelder.
Hi, John. Go ahead. I'll yield to you.
I think, Paul, we have your point. We will have to consider it, but I think that we need to move on at this point with the discussion.
Right, and John, you did that to me in June when we were talking about the noise. I never heard back from you. It goes into the bureaucratic black hole.
No, I know you were contacted, and there were.
You said you'd get back to us when we complained. We don't have to go back with what goes on in June, but because it's so minor in comparison to this. It's so minor in comparison to this. With knowledge, you are putting people in danger.
Paul, just calm down. We got your point, and it's going to have to be considered as part of this process.
It should have been considered before the process, because nothing is more important than protecting people's safety.
David, if you don't, this is Ben. Let me just maybe provide a little bit of clarity about the role of the task force and your role. The plan amendment authorization sets the boundary for the study, and it includes the WMATA parcel and the Virginia Tech parcel. The task force is charged with reviewing the development that's being proposed within those boundaries, and it includes topics such as sidewalks, streets, transportation. We recognize that certainly this area is going to be attractive for folks coming outside of the transit station area to access the metro and the amenities. That discussion about what the network outside of the transit station area is outside of the scope of this study and the prerogative of this group.
I'm sorry, I don't accept that.
Task force member is certainly, you are well within your right, Paul, and anyone else to object to the authorization and the plan amendment, and that will be noted. But the scope of this project is specifically the transit station area. I will note that we may be able to look at opportunities outside of the transit station area as a follow-on motion And the task force can make that recommendation. And we've done that in other station areas, including Tyson's and Reston. But that study is separate from the study that you guys have been asked to provide input to.
I strongly disagree with what you're saying because
You may very well.
Because if this is going to create an attractive nuisance, and plaintiffs' lawyers will seize on that word, if it creates an attractive nuisance, then the amount of density and the amount of authorization within those tracks should be reduced accordingly. Now, I've had some conversations and had some contact as far as the board, as far as the rector of the Board of Visitors of Virginia Tech, and maybe you should go back to some of the people who may not be aware about the danger that this site is going to impose. You try to put everyone in a bureaucratic box, but when there's some grieving parent out there, I don't want it on my conscience. Does Supervisor Faust want it on his?
Paul, we appreciate your comments. You are certainly welcome to take whatever position you feel is appropriate. The study area is set, and the purpose of this task force is to evaluate what's being proposed within that transit station.
And that's exactly what I'm doing.
If you believe that additional work should occur, please share that with us.
It is totally within the role of someone talking about how that area should be developed. It's totally within that role to see how that area will affect the surrounding community. Based on what you're saying, based on the knowledge that you're not going to be willing to give sufficient safety to the people in the surrounding community, there should be much less development. There should be much less development at West Falls Church than is currently contemplated. Now, if you go back to where I was at the beginning, I was as pro-development as anyone. But I don't want to have on my conscience the fact that I'm saying, oh, great, there's going to be X number of condos and X number of restaurants, and people are going to end up being in danger as a result of it.
Paul, you and I are not the only two people on this call, and so I'd like to defer to David to take over as chair.
Okay, yes, I would like, well, I guess what I would like to say is this. I think part of the problem is we have two things going. We've got more development, then we have consequences that can take place at various distances. How do we define, Ben, what is the area that is legitimately analyzed in terms of the effect of this project? So, for example, do we have any idea about how many more school kids, this project is likely to produce? And if so, what their routes would be, how far they would go? It's because there can be effects miles and miles away of any project. And of course, it's unreasonable to expect a developer to mitigate for effects that are like miles away. But just how far do you go? Maybe Paul has got a point as to where he's talking about. Some of that, though, if he's talking about Casemont and Beacon and all, it seemed to me are way the other side of say, where school kids would be going to, say, reach Haycock from this development. So, I mean, at what point can we say that it's appropriate for the developers to mitigate effects? I mean, how far out? Ben, you seem to be saying not this far out. It's not in the area.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the plan amendment. Part of the purpose of the plan amendment is to set some guidelines and expectations. And so I think it's appropriate for the task force to take a position that recognizes that people from outside of the transit station area are going to want to access it, and that it should be evaluated. But you are not at this point. We don't have the study is not created to now look at that within that detail of, well, what are the routes? And I'm not suggesting that it shouldn't be evaluated, but I think the direction of the task force is something that's important, and I think that it is to make that notation that we have inadequate pedestrian and possibly bicycle facilities, and that should be considered when development is proposed.
Ben and David, this is Mike.
Certainly within the bounds of the task force.
Ben and David, this is Mike Garcia. Hi. We have a couple more presentations that I think might also help shed some light on the discussion.
Okay, that sounds fine. I think we should move on because we certainly see where Paul stands, and I understand his concerns, but there's got to be some sort of geographical limit to where you're actually going to say this project has got effects, since it can have effects miles away, and that can't all be part of the situation. I'll drop it at that, and I'm going to let you go on if it's all right with Brian and everybody else.
No, that's a good point. I think if we share the next rounds of presentations, you'll understand the areas of effect, so that way you can see with the ped and bike plan, and then what Bob has for the other transportation study. Thank you.
Yeah, please go ahead. Whoever's next.
Yeah, that would be me again. So this is so as Paul was talking about sidewalks and such, we also are planning an effort to not just within the bounds of the plan amendment here, but we're also looking at it from a larger area. And Tim Kutz is going to talk about this pedestrian and or active transportation plan that looks at pedestrians and bikes around the West Falls Church area. And it actually goes beyond the boundaries of the CDC, of the plan amendment that we're talking about tonight. So Tim Kutz is online, and I'm going to turn it over to him.
All right, thanks, Bob. And you can go to the next slide. All right, so as Bob mentioned, really, hopefully addressing some of your concerns, Paul. I know that from walking the area myself, that you're right, there are a lot of inadequate facilities, especially as you're coming down Haycock, the pathway on the north side of Haycock, coming from Haycock Elementary School down to the metro station. It's fairly narrow. It's only a few feet as you approach the I-60, the bridge over I-66, that is. And really, there's a lot of areas around the TSA that are not safe and not hospitable pedestrians and cyclists. So this effort here is separate from the plan amendment, but we do want to consider that this is going to be a major attractor of not just vehicular traffic, but bike and ped traffic as well. And how do we facilitate those movements safely and efficiently? And so what this plan is looking to do is review the existing conditions. Again, actually getting out there, walking the sidewalks or lack thereof, walking the streets, seeing what's out there, and also applying a sort of methodology to measure the level of comfort, level of traffic stress is the technical term that I'll get into, that pedestrians and cyclists are facing. And so part of looking at that, as Chris mentioned, is how do you prioritize when you have limited funds to do some of these projects? How do you prioritize? And so I think some of the methodologies that we're using to look at that are going to help prioritize, okay, where are the really dangerous areas for bikes and pedestrians? Where can we make the biggest impact with the limited funds we have? And so I think in looking at that a little closely, even beyond the timeline that we're looking at with the plan amendment, I think we can hope to achieve some improvements there. So part of that too is obviously we have City of Falls Church right next door, and we've been working with them very closely on looking at their plans, bicycle master plan, as well as some of their improvements to the shared use path on Shreve Road and other area projects. VDOT is actually taking a really close look at Shreve Road and their Shreve Road corridor study. So trying to combine all those, what we have planned in the current bicycle master plan and trails plan, and really getting a comprehensive view of how we can improve the situation here. And ultimately, as Bob may end up talking in the next presentation about trying to reduce the vehicular traffic and really get folks in these neighborhoods comfortable with walking and bicycling. So if you can move on to the next slide. So I mentioned level of comfort, pedestrian level of comfort. This was developed by Montgomery County, and actually I heard somebody from the community mention this in September, and was happy to hear that Montgomery County has been looking very closely at what they can do to better facilitate pedestrian and bicycle travel. And so pedestrian level of comfort is a way of doing that. You're looking at an individual facility, whether it be a pathway, a sidewalk, or crossing, either controlled or uncontrolled crossing the roadway, looking at various attributes to those pathways or crossings. And what I mean by that is looking at how many lanes are you crossing. If you're crossing 6 lanes versus 2 lanes, there's an obvious difference in comfort. keeping in mind the speed of that facility, of that roadway. And then for pathways, obviously you're going to have a much more comfortable experience, safer experience if you have a wider sidewalk and if you have a wider buffer next to that sidewalk to shield you from traffic on the adjacent roadway. So we've been looking at that and trying to develop our own methodology based on what Montgomery County has done. And again, it's a point-based system, ranking all those attributes, and then looking at the individual facilities, the crossings, and saying, okay, where does that rate on the scale? You can see on the right, either very comfortable all the way down to unacceptable. And frankly, there are several unacceptable facilities and areas, as we've noted in our study. So we can go on to the next slide. And so here's just some anecdotal evidence. Again, this is just from Google Street View, taken in a moment in time as that car was passing by. And you can see that there's not really a safe place for this pedestrian on Haycock Road to cross. You can barely see all the way down to Falls Church Drive, there's a signal. And then behind the pedestrian, there's a signal at the Metro Access Road, but a very large expanse where there's not a safe crossing. And so naturally, people are going to take the more convenient path, crossing where it's not safe to do so. Looking at Leesburg Pike, the image on the bottom right, even more dangerous. This is somebody coming from Dale Drive, crossing over to get to the metro station, right by the I-66 interchange. Not a safe maneuver at all, but you can bet people are doing this on a regular basis. So how do we look at and making those improvements? How do we get people safely across the road and feel more comfortable walking and biking in this area? And I think pedestrian level of comfort, looking and prioritizing those facilities is one way of doing that. If you go on to the next slide, we talk a little bit about bicycle level of traffic stress. And this is something that the county's already doing. It's being done nationwide in various jurisdictions. But Fairfax County looks at how stressful a roadway may be for a cyclist. So most comfortable LTS 1, that's going to be, you might have a dedicated pathway for a cyclist to use. You're going to be around slow moving traffic. And you could feel comfortable taking your kids on that road. Obviously, use caution. That's an issue where you're going to have very high speeds of travel, a lot more traffic, and it's only going to be comfortable for people who are really close to professional cyclists. Go to the next slide, we can kind of see what that looks like around the area of West Falls Church on a bicycle level traffic stress map. And there's a lot of lines here, but I want you to pay a special attention to the red ones. You can see running along the right side down Great Falls, and then from Haycock all the way down to Shreve, and then Route 7. And that provides an effective barrier for cyclists trying to access the metro station and these developments that are being proposed in this area. So obviously a major concern and something we want to look at addressing with this plan is making those areas more comfortable for cyclists and pedestrians alike. Move on to the next slide. And one other thing I wanted to mention is, kind of looking at how COVID-19 has had an effect on active transportation. Not too far away from the metro station, you have trail counters in Arlington County. So the Bon Air trail counter in May of this year counted 94,000 trail users on the WNOD trail. That's a major increase over a year ago. It was up by 60%. And what we're seeing around the county and really around the nation is that people are getting out and biking and cycling a lot more than they used to with COVID going on. So I think that's a trend that's going to continue. And it's, again, highlighting the importance of providing these safer facilities and facilitating those movements, because we do have a major regional trail just to the south of these sites. So part of what I mentioned before, a lot of coordination has been going on with various projects. The City of Falls Church has a lot of projects going on dedicated to bike and ped improvements. And so we've been working closely with them. They just had their West End Small Area Plan approved and adopted in September of this year. And again, we've been working with VDOT on the Shreve Road corridor study and developing some of the recommendations with them for really facilitating movement from the WNOD trail up Shreve Road and over, ultimately up to the metro station. And again, working with Chris and his team, the active transportation team in the county, to try to integrate some of these changes with the active Fairfax transportation plan. I think you can move on to the next slide. So I don't have specifics to talk with you all today because I do want to get over to Bob's presentation if we can. And really, it's going to involve a lot of the community's input. We have ideas about where we can make improvements based on the knowledge we have from looking at existing conditions in the area, walking the streets in the area and existing neighborhoods. But it's going to require a lot of community input for people who walk and bike to the metro station from the outlying neighborhoods. So that's going to be a key piece of this. We really want, the goal of this is to increase active transportation and, as I said, thereby reducing some of the vehicular traffic that we see in this area and hopefully alleviating some of the congestion on some of the key intersections like Haycock and 7. And then going a little further, placemaking in healthy communities has been a huge goal of the counties, and that stands with this plan, really encouraging these modes we call active transportation modes, not only through building these facilities or recommending these facilities, but also with encouragement programs. Tyson's area has some encouragement programs to try to get area students out and cycling and walking. So next slide, I believe is the last one for this. So again, as I said, what are we looking at for next steps? There's going to be a lot more coordination going on with the active transportation team, the City of Falls Church, and the development team, certainly. Again, as Ben said, we're looking at 2 sites here. And so we want to make sure that we're facilitating pedestrian and bicycle movement within those sites, but also looking at the wider area as well. So that's something to consider when you're looking at the plan text over the next several weeks is that happening with the plan text? Will pedestrian and bicycle travel be facilitated with what we're proposing here with the street network and the pedestrian circulation network? And then obviously getting input from the community, other stakeholders, public engagement. This is very early on in the process for this plan, but over the next several months, we want to work closely with the community and then see where the biggest needs are for addressing your concerns. And then finally, refining some of the recommendations that we put forward and completing the report and integrating that with the active Fairfax transportation plan, the countywide plan that Chris spoke to. And so that should be the last slide, and take any questions you
may. I see that there actually have been a lot of hands raised by people who aren't on the task force. Brian, are we going to entertain that now or later?
We were planning on having, as we normally do, the non-task force members ask questions at the end, just so that, there's plenty of time for the task force to ask questions, have discussions, and hear the presentations that are prepared.
Fine with me. Those of you who still have your hands up there, I hope you can wait a little bit, and we'll just move on then, I guess. Unless Paul has got his hand up still and didn't take it down from before. Because I do see you have a hand up. Paul? Okay, well, why don't we just move on then?
Okay, I'm going to start talking about the traffic analysis and the other part of the presentation tonight. So this one will also have lots of information that I can share with you all. And as I did mention, we do have comments from VDOT, preliminary comments from VDOT, as well as from FCDOT. This is an ongoing project, or ongoing review that we're doing with EYA and our Evan Goldman and Virginia Tech and the crew over there on the development side, but we're also working with VDOT and looking at the impacts to traffic that the site will generate, but also looking at the traffic that's, or the circulation that's happening with the grid of streets that's within the site, and where, because it is on a metro station site, that this will take advantage of the bus and the Orange Line train service that hopefully will take cars off the road, and people will be able to walk to this facility, or these facilities, and still be able to use transit and the WMATA Metro rail service. So again, the map is here for reference. We're going to get onto the discussion. So when we're doing transportation level analysis, you know, there's a transportation impact analysis out there. I just want to give you like a guidance of how these things come about. And with this project, with the plan amendment, they're able to review the traffic impacts on the larger network area. So it's not just within the confines of the boundaries of the two sites. Traffic actually does affect a much larger area. And this comp plan is where we're going to be able to provide some kind of mitigations, or at least recommendations to go forward to mitigate some of the traffic that is generated. We're also looking at making recommendations for bicycle and pedestrian facilities within the site. And then, as Tim had mentioned, Chris had mentioned, we'd be looking at the area around the site itself too. So as they propose land uses, we have to look at the traffic level impact. So they're collecting traffic data, they establish a baseline condition, and then we look at the land uses themselves and how many trips those are generated. And then we model that over time, and it's a snapshot of time, but it's a forecast of what might happen over a certain period of time. This project for WMATA Virginia Tech is proposed to be completed by the year 2030. The site that is at the City of Falls Church, which is this area here, where the high school is being redeveloped, they're looking at a 2025 project completion date. As I hear from Evans Group, that they're looking to propose and build the infrastructure within all three sites at the same time. So that way, the main road, or Haycock Road, will actually be a parallel grid street to Haycock Road that will alleviate the traffic. We have the I-66 new ramp construction that will alleviate some of the traffic congestion at the intersection of Haycock and Leesburg Pike, because we'll have a direct access to the WMATA Metro Station. So the process for the TIA, and like I said, this is still ongoing. It has been submitted by the development team and their consultant. Their traffic consultant did submit that. I put on here the actual in the blue here. This is the traffic impact analysis is located at that website, and it will be on the slides that you'll see afterwards. But you can click on that; it'll take you directly to the page where the TIA is, so you can review that on your own if you like. But as I mentioned, we're looking at the traffic impact analysis that they produced, and we're reviewing it, VDOT and FCDOT, to look at the road conditions with and without the development, what it's going to do. So, but also looking at what they're proposing to do for mitigations and improvements for the roadway to offset those impacts. And we got to balance the land uses that they're proposing to see if there can still be efficient traffic movement. But we're also looking at their abilities for pedestrian and bicycle activity, access to the metro station, and then access to other areas around the project site, that this all works together. Let's see here. So on the just a simple calculation, trip generation, it helps us. It's one of the first steps we use to calculate how much trips may be generated by the site. So in this slide here, I looked at the exercise of what's happening today, and based on the Virginia Tech campus of the building that's there now, if there are students there and employees, how much trips would that generate on a weekday trip, and then AM and PM peak. So I put here a calculation that this is from the Institute of Transportation Engineers, and it is a tool that we use in traffic forecasting that looks at the average trips generated by a particular land use. And it's a large volume of documents, but they have rates for every kind, almost every kind of use that we can imagine that has been studied and analyzed, and they came up with a formula for generating trips. This is the ITE book. The trip generation manual is used nationwide by transportation agencies across the U.S. and it's used extensively for getting the base level transportation analysis started. So it's just a way to start the process here. And then I looked at from the TIA, from the 2030 projected trip generation, what they're proposing for the land uses on the site, and this is in the TIA, traffic impact analysis, that Virginia Tech is proposing 160,000 square feet of institutional use. So this blue box, what they're proposing for office, retail, and residential, and then also for the water site for the office, retail, and residential units that they're proposing. And this is from their TIA. And but they're also looking at not just trip generation for the simple calculations, but they're also looking at, since they're on site at the Ramada Metro Station where buses and the commuter rail is, you can take advantage of what's called trip reduction or travel demand reductions. And they're using a 45% travel demand because they're right on top of the station. And because it is the train station, they're also proposing mixed use where live, work, play. People can use that. They don't actually have to use a vehicle to get between all three sites. They can just walk to those sites. Between the Virginia Tech Ramada Metro and the City of Falls Church project, they can just walk to all of that. The pedestrian and bicycle facilities that they're planning to do within the sites, within all three sites, that also helps to give them a credit. So the 11,000 net new weekday trips is what they're proposing with the two sites at Ramada, Virginia Tech. And we're looking at the peak, AM peak hours and the PM peak hours as well to give us an idea as to where we're starting from for the traffic impact. And then we also have, they're also modeling what this does going forward, and then they propose mitigations to see what they can do to alleviate the traffic that is generated by the site. And we're going to be looking to them to propose mitigations to see what they are planning to do to alleviate the traffic concerns on the, or traffic concerns and the conflicts on the roadways. So looking at the site itself, this is from 2019. These are traffic counts were taken at the intersections in May of 2018 and 2019. This establishes the framework of the trips and the level of service at the intersections. And I included a signalized intersection delay scale as well as unsignalized, and just explaining that where it's in green, A, B, and C, these are basically a traffic condition at an intersection where it's not a lot of congestion. You're able to get through the intersection fairly quickly, but it also is at intersections that are operating well, but also it could be where they are in more of a suburban type feel or acting like they have good traffic flow through the intersection. We're looking at level of service D, which is actually a more efficient use of the traffic because the roadway is operating at a nominal capacity. We're getting good traffic flow, but you're also allowing for bicyclists and pedestrians to use the facilities. In A, B, and C, you might have more people riding in their cars because these intersections are working at that level. So no one's riding bikes or no one's walking to the facilities or walking in the neighborhoods. Level of service E, that's when you're starting to approach a little bit more congested roadways. Intersections may be a little bit tougher to get through, so you're looking at different delays. And then obviously at LOSF, so you're looking at a lot more congestion. It could be stop and go traffic and all that. So a couple of the intersections are here that do experience an LOSF in the AM peak. So that is Route 7 in Idlewood, and we did have that tested by the development team just to see what the impacts were. We had heard from the community at Lemon Road in Idlewood that there was some concern about this intersection, so we did have them do that analysis. And so they do recognize that through this existing conditions from 2019, that there is a failing intersection in the morning hours, and then the PM it actually it relieves itself to level service E, which is a low E, relatively low E, but it's still starting to generate traffic that might be of concern. The other one is at Route 7 at Chestnut Street. This signal is actually going. This intersection is going to be modified. It's part of the City of Falls Church project, and they're going to be proposing a signal there. The Route 7 at Haycock Road, this is the main intersection, this is number 5. We're trying to get that intersection to also function well. It's right now operating at, in the 2019 condition, it's operating at a level service E. So with the proposed mitigations, with the proposed development and then mitigations, this intersection also has to work. So you look at that center intersection, but it also affects all the other intersections going down Route 7 and also on Haycock Road because they're all connected in some way. And traffic does not stop at a particular boundary or a street or something like that. It still keeps going on, and you know that. So next slide is looking at the same intersections, but looking at it from the 2030 condition and what they're proposing with their some mitigations on it, but it also looks at the kinds of delay that might happen at those intersections. So they are looking at Route 7 in Idlewood. Again, we have that same condition. It's LOSF in the morning. PM peak is starting to climb higher. So there's I have the slides that will talk about mitigations specifically and what else is coming down the line. Route 7 and Chestnut Street, that's number 4 here. They're looking to propose a signal at that intersection, but they're also changing the way that intersection works with Commons Drive. And that's a proposal that's going with the City of Falls Church project. But it's included in the TIA because it's a traffic signal that's now going to be affecting Route 7 itself. And it also affects all the other intersections along both Haycock and Route 7. We did go have them on Haycock Road look at the intersection at Great Falls Street, that is intersection number 12. So they're looking at that in the future. It's a signalized intersection right now. We're looking at a level of service C in the AM, but level of service D in the PM. But they also are proposing mitigations for that intersection as well. With the development of the City of Falls Church, there are 2 signals being proposed on Haycock Road between Falls Church Drive and Haycock and Route 7. That is intersection 6 and 17. One is at Mustang Alley at Haycock Road. The other one is at Street C. So those would be 2 new intersections. There are 2 new signals being proposed there. But the county, through our review, we're only supporting one of those, but we'd like to see them study the roadways if only one is permitted to be installed there. So I also have a slide here that later on, when you look at the slides afterwards, that combines both of the tables from the existing and the 2030. It's in one slide, and you'll be able to compare side by side. So that is created for you. It's in the additional slides that I have for that you'll be able to see later when we put it on the website. So the proposed mitigations, this is what the developer is proposing to do for all these intersections. Those are in the purple boxes here. So they're proposing mitigations at almost every intersection. There are still some that do need to have some mitigation recommendations, and that's something that we're still working with the development team on, as well as working with VDOT to make sure that there are mitigations at the other intersections as well. I'd like to point out that on Route 7, there's a couple other things that we're looking at for mitigations that might help traffic, and that is the I-66 connector ramp. That is something that VDOT is currently constructing. It will come off the I-66 eastbound ramp, and it'll actually have a newer access route to directly to the metro site. So we're hoping that with that traffic relief, it'll improve the intersections along Route 7 and at the main intersection at intersection 5. That has already been included in their traffic impact analysis. They already accounted for that. Something else that the county is looking at is working with Northern Virginia Transportation Commission is the Route 7 BRT system, and I have a couple slides that talks about that. That is a new transit facility being proposed from the Tysons area down to Alexandria. It will be actually running in Route 7 itself. And so there's more studies, plans going on with that, and there will be some other discussions with the community. They also are looking at a mitigation or the at Route 7 in Idlewood. That would be the area where we're proposing that the BRT system changes from median running in the middle of the roadway to a mixed traffic, which is running in the same lanes as the other vehicles are. As it goes down from the I-66 to the Falls Church boundary, that's the area of transition. So there will be some mitigations that go on with that project at Idlewood and Route 7. So for the project here, they're looking at modifying the traffic signal at Route 7 Idlewood with modifying the signal timing on that. That also has an impact on the rest of the intersections, signalized intersections, but it also, whatever is changed, whatever is mitigated at intersection 5 at Haycock and Route 7 actually follows the line down the road. So if there's any changes at this intersection, VDOT and Fairfax County, we look at how it impacts the rest of the intersections along Route 7 and also along Haycock Road. So they're all interconnected because it's a connected system. Excuse me. I have to take a sip. Hold on. So the mitigations around the corner, I have them listed here. Looking at Haycock Road, the signals I mentioned, and all that. So at Falls Church Drive at Haycock Road, they're proposing a second left out of the site. So they're looking at a dual left condition that will go onto Haycock Road. So that's something new. Haycock and Metro Access are looking at modifying the signal timing. So if they're doing the signal timing at this intersection, they also have to look at the other ones and part of their analysis. At Great Falls Street, they're looking for a lane change configuration, but that's to put in a dedicated left turn lane at Great Falls Street. And there's still some ongoing discussion we have with VDOT about that and how that can be done. So, as well as the development team. So let me go back here. So these are the comments that VDOT's provided, and they're looking at. They really didn't have as many technical comments as I thought they would have had, but these are some of the ones that they are looking at. So they're looking at again the Haycock and Falls Church Drive. That was where they're proposing the development team is proposing dual lefts. So VDOT's is concerned about the signal phasing at that signal. And they would like the development team to provide more information about the signal phasing at that intersection. At Great Falls Street, they're looking at, is there right-of-way available? Can they do that within the existing roadway to make the changes for a left turn lane? And they're looking at for what they call lane storage. That's how long the turn lane is and how many vehicles can be stored in it. So they'd like more information about that. Route 7 and Chestnut Street, that's on, that was proposed with the City of Falls Church project. So their question is, what happens to all the intersections if that signal is not approved? So they need to provide an explanation of that. And then the development layout within the site itself, with the grid of streets, they're looking at traffic assignments for the modeling of the program. How all the trips will be generated from the land uses there, but which intersections will be accessed by what's happening inside the site. So these are actually pretty good comments. Not really too technical here, but this is the first round of comments from VDOT, and they'll have to go through a comment resolution meeting or a comment resolution discussion with VDOT about how to address these comments, and then prepare the traffic analysis report that reflects this. I also have Fairfax County comments, and these are the ones that I've looked at as well. So I'm looking at both the WMATA Virginia Tech site, but also looking at it, how does it fit in with the City of Falls Church project? So the mitigations that they're proposing with this site, these two sites, they also have to work with the City of Falls Church and make sure that the mitigation proposed in one project is not different than the ones that are proposed with these projects. Again, they have to review, VDOT has to review and approve any kind of mitigation. So that's part of the process. Route 7 Haycock Road, we need to look at achieving level of service D, which actually will dictate the rest of the flow for Route 7 and Haycock Road, making sure that the signal timings work, that there's efficient traffic, vehicle traffic movement. As I mentioned before, the two new signals on Haycock Road, only Fairfax County is only looking at one. Will only support one of those intersections, but we'd like to see an analysis of that only includes one of those intersections that are signalized, not both of them, and we don't have that yet. Then again, the Falls Church Drive dual lefts, the right-of-way availability. I think that is looking at the right-of-way that's on Falls Church Drive, not to impact the residential, but they'll have to look at impacting the Virginia Tech site if they need to accommodate that third lane or the third lane, the second left lane. So where's that right of way going to be from? So we'd like to see some diagrams or sketches about that, and then an explanation. So again, the I-66 westbound, this is the some of the other projects in the area. So there's websites that I have here that describes the project. So this project has already started in April 2020, and it's actually looking to be completed sometime this year, hopefully by the end of the calendar year, and that will be available for the Metro buses, as well as anyone else looking to access directly to the WMATA Metro station site. The Route 7 project, the Route 7 BRT project called Envision Route 7. You can see the travel, the length of the project is from the Tysons area to Alexandria. And the city, the Fairfax County is looking at we have a separate planning project working with our engineers and with NBTC and VDOT. We're looking at the area from the Tysons area to the I-66 Beltway, or I-66 highway, and looking at that specifically with to see where we can start looking at the median running and looking at the traffic studies that is generated by that project. The BRT line will continue along Route 7. There'll be a little bump out at East Falls Church, a connection to it, but it's generally going to follow Route 7 BRT, Route 7 all the way down to Alexandria. Some more information about the project, how long, the length of it, access to Metro Rail and all that. So we're looking at a possibility that this will have about 9,500 transit riders on the system. So that means that there will be less vehicles on the roadways, on the roadway in the corridor. And they're looking at a potential station at Chestnut Street and Commons Drive on Route 7. Okay. Now I'm going to open it up for questions, and I can flip back to any of the slides as well.
So before we do that, it's getting late. I think what we want to do is hear from the task force comments and questions. We'll write them down, but we won't try to respond to things right now. And we'll try to get responses at another time to give everyone a chance to kind of give their questions and comments.
Mike, what would you like us to do then? Do you want us to write it in the chat thing or email them to you? Or?
Oh, no, go ahead and just say them now. We're just probably not going to take the time to respond unless it's a quick response. And that we just want to hear, we want to give, everyone's been waiting patiently. So I think we want to give everyone a chance to go see their comments and questions.
Okay.
Thanks, Mike.
So I'm trying to say, I don't see anybody with a hand up on the task force. So, I mean, I have a couple of things I'd say, but I don't need to take the time now. I could put them in an email or something, but I don't know if that's
go ahead.
Because most of these things are, you know, if it's a task force question, they're supposed to be on the record. So, let me say what I was going to say. Let me make sure I understand what this first of all, this presentation will be on the website, right? For this, so that we can go to it and click on the links, Bob?
Yes, it'll be on the website. I will work with Brian to get the actual PowerPoint up on the website, and then you'll also have the audio recording of it as well.
Okay, I have people in my association who would like to see what there is of the traffic study so far. So will this be up within the next few days or what?
Yes, I'm looking to try to get it up by Friday.
Okay. I hate to get down to a lot of details. We don't have a lot of time. You know, I get concerned about Grove and Highland and stuff for which nobody has mentioned any kind of measures. I just don't know how much time I want to take on that. I know you said once before that Highland did not qualify for a light, but Grove might. It's hard to get out of those streets now. I don't know what the people on those streets would actually want, but it would be a problem if people were really locked in there. And Grove, as I understand, was actually getting dumped into a failing position on your chart.
Yes, David, yeah. So those are some of the intersections that, like Grove and Highland you mentioned, that do not have any mitigations right now, that they're not proposing anything. So we would like to see or hear from the development team what they're proposing for mitigations there. And
okay.
If that's something that we can work together with them on that to propose mitigations, or if that's something that the county might have to do. But we want to hear from them as well as what their ideas are for proposing mitigations at the unsignalized intersection, which is Grove and Highland.
Okay.
Turner Avenue is another one. So
I'm sorry, which one?
Turner Avenue, which is just on the other side of 66. That's also an unsignalized intersection.
Okay, right. I see what you mean. Right. Okay.
Right. So we want to hear a little bit more from the development team on the mitigations at those intersections.
If you don't put signals at those intersections, what other kind of mitigation would even be possible?
Right. That's something we'll have to determine. You can't put signals everywhere, but there might be some other mitigations that we can look for or look through or analyze to see if those would work.
Okay. I don't know if I really have anything else. I don't need to take a lot of time on this.
Okay. So
I saw.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say I saw Chris had his hand up, and then Stephanie had her hand up as well.
Oh,
I
yes,
don't know if
right,
you're continuing to respond to David's
Chris,
question.
how about you first?
Yeah, sure. Just a quick question. I know that there's been a study going on the Shreve Road traffic situation. Are you taking into consideration the outcome of that study as well into the traffic planning for the WMATA project? Since it's just on the corner of the diagram there, but it is a major input into the area.
Yeah, so in the transportation model that we provided to them, it actually included Shreve Road in their analysis, so that would affect the intersections here. But specifically the Shreve Road corridor study, I don't have enough information from my perspective, but there's others on the team here that might be able to respond to what that Shreve Road corridor study is. So Tim Kutz, I believe you're part of that group or others.
Yeah, and they're still in the process. Yeah, and they're still in the process of refining their recommendations, and then really they're looking at ways to slow down the traffic on Shreve Road. Because many of you probably know there's a fatality there last year. So it's not so much looking at how that's going to change traffic. They're actually not even looking in the corridor study at the intersection of Shreve Road and Route 7. It's more so looking at the corridor from more of a safety perspective.
Okay, thank you.
And Stephanie, so you have your hand up as well. You want to go ahead?
Yes. So it looks to me as though the mitigations plan for Route 7 and Idlewood are being pinned to the bus rapid transit planning. And the only one I see proposed is this modification of the signal timing, which I don't understand, and I'd appreciate an explanation of that, not right now, but that's a question that how does that help? Is it longer or shorter? How is that helping? And, you know, it seems to me that it's being put off to the bus rapid transit situation.
Yeah, I can really quickly mention the signal timing. I believe it's for what allows the adjustment of the signal timing is looking at additional green time for the side streets, but also respective of the Route 7 traffic that generates the most traffic or creates the most traffic. So this is still it's a proposed mitigation. It's still something that it needs to be reviewed with VDOT to see if they'll actually allow that. But we're looking at some kind of mitigation there to help you in the short term. And the BRT Route 7 project is actually a longer term project. So we're looking at having the development team work with us and VDOT to see if there's mitigations that can happen in the near term rather than in the long term. But we can explain that a little bit more detail too with follow-up as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions that have come up?
Yes, actually, I just thought of one actually. Bob, in any of this, is there going to be in any of this analysis a way for us to compare the amount of traffic you would project, let's say at peak hours? They can be during the day too, I don't care, but especially peak hours on Highland and Grove after this development compared to what they would experience now? I mean, I know you do intersections. What I don't see is how much actual traffic would be on those streets.
Right. So that's something we can work with Evan's team and the traffic consultants that they have that they're working with to see what the traffic volumes are in their proposed analysis, and we can look at the volumes that way. So that could be a separate slide or a separate discussion we can have about that, or bring it forward to you all for next month for just a smaller presentation to answer some of these questions.
Because I think that's what people are going to know. People complain about the amount of traffic, especially on Highland, and I think on both Highland and Grove, a lot of it could, could increase as a result of this. I think the way we feel about this may depend an awful lot on just how much worse the traffic on these streets is going to be than it is now.
No, that's a good question, and that's something that I can work with the development team and their traffic consultant on preparing information about that, and not necessarily just Grove and Highland. We might look at all the other streets for the volumes too.
Sure, that's fine.
Give some information about that.
Okay, thank you, Bob. And I see Cheryl's got her hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, very quickly, David, you asked a great question because it should be beyond just Highland and Grove. I mean, what are the traffic projections there, assuming no development? And also, what are the assumptions concerning bike lanes, street grids, sidewalks, if there's no development? So if nothing happens, what are the projections and what are the plans?
And I'll second you on that, Cheryl. I've always maintained it's that too. It's not just present conditions versus if they develop this. What happens if they don't develop this? Because WMATA could still develop something by right if they don't get a rezoning or a change in the comp plan. So there's that aspect too. How much worse is the traffic going to be in any of these streets if they develop as they would like to versus what you might expect if they developed by right? And again, I don't know if that's folded into this at all, but those are crucial questions for us.
Those are actually folded into their traffic impact analysis. I only provided proposed development at 2030, but they do also have an analysis that looks at it without any development or without this development occurring and what happens to the network around it.
And for that matter, I would say, would you do the same thing simply for Haycock, at least for the stretch of Haycock from, let's say, 7 to Great Falls? How much of an increase in traffic is there going to be from, from present conditions to with this development, or if they developed by right? Is there any way to measure that? Is it going to be so locked that nobody really can get through on Haycock at all?
And not just the traffic, David, but are there plans for bike paths, sidewalks, all that kind of stuff if the metro doesn't develop? I mean, are we going to be locked out of all of this if we don't, and all of the funding if we don't do something proactive?
Right. So all of those things.
The answer, in most of those situations, the answer is more so about the timing aspect of it. With most developments, depending on the size of it, whatever the frontage is of the property will wind up getting developed, sidewalks, trails, whatever is occurring there. And it happens when the development happens. Anything that's needed for the development that's further off-site will also happen when the development happens. As far as the timing aspect of it, if you don't do anything, 9 times out of 10, you don't get anything until something develops there, whatever it may be. In terms of things that may be further off-site or that may not necessarily be impacted by the development itself, that's more so it happens when it happens regardless of development. So when it comes to things that are kind of in the immediate vicinity of the site or things that are needed by the site or things that are generated by the site in terms of, their either bike demand, pedestrian demand, vehicular demand, those things happen before or as the property is developing. And that goes more so to the entitlement stage. We're in the comprehensive planning stage, but right now what we're saying is, what are those things that are needed? We're not going to talk about, the proffer part of things, which is when the development happens, you go in and they proffer to do this or proffer to do that at this time or at that time. Right now, we're just talking about the world of things that are needed if this land use becomes something different than what it currently is proposed for right now. But most of what you're talking about is kind of a timing thing. It happens when the development happens, or, it kind of hangs around there unless there's some, specific need and funding source that is provided for either the state to do it or for the jurisdiction to do it. So that's the overarching general answer. Obviously, there's some nuance in there depending on, you know, priorities and things like that, but that's the general answer.
Thanks, Greg. I don't see any more task force hands. Do we have time to, let me take mine down. Do we have time to then open this up for the other attendees, Brian, or not?
We are over time. For any questions that have been asked in the chat box, I will save the chat and forward that on to Bob and the Fairfax County Department of Transportation staff that's here. David, I mean, it's up to you and the rest of the task force if you want to, you know.
Well, I'm willing to
wait
listen
5
some
or
more,
10
but I
more
mean,
minutes.
I don't like to keep staff who are actually working and, you know, here any longer than necessary. Can we limit it to, I see about 4 hands up. Is there any way to like limit each question and answer to only about a minute and a half or so? Can we try that? If you're willing to do it, I'd call on some people. I know Lauren already had a question. I don't know if her hand's up a second time. Cheryl, I don't think Cheryl Sim did not. Is there something you can ask and get an answer to, you think, in a minute or two? Cheryl, if you're there still?
I'm still, yeah, David, thank you very much. I can go very quickly. I would like to thank Paul for his comments earlier this evening. And I'm a little bit concerned about a couple of things that Ben Wiles mentioned. And perhaps, Ben, you can send me an email tomorrow, but I really would like clarification from you if you and Supervisor Faust do not believe that my neighborhood will be impacted by this development. And this proposed mitigation includes Haycock and Great Falls. So I'm a little bit concerned about why you would suggest that our area is outside of the study and the project impact. But anyway, you can send me an email, Ben. You didn't answer my last one, so I'm happy to hear from you tomorrow or the next day. Thank you, David, for entertaining that.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. Nancy McFalls, you have not spoken tonight. Can you ask something fairly brief here?
I'm filling up the chat with my questions, but my biggest question, I think this echoes, I believe it was Stephanie, what is going on Route 7 to make that commercial road the primary way to move people to and from this new development? We cannot use Haycock Road after Route 66. It is too small. It dead ends after a couple blocks. And that light at Great Falls Street, the residents who live on these tiny little streets do not care if cars can move more quickly through there. That is absolutely against our priority. Pedestrians hit at that almost hit at that intersection every day. We've fought to get dedicated lights and other things just to protect the people who are walking. And the idea that we can now move more cars through will just make it more attractive. Great Falls Street is residential. It is not commercial. Route 7, Falls Church City needs to buck up and expand the lanes or do something to get cars through Route 7, because right now it's 25 miles an hour. It has a ton of lights and it's inconvenient. Great Falls Street, that has very few lights, and so people could just fly down. And Westmoreland's another one, and Haycock Street after Great Falls Street. It is super dangerous. Kids, I believe, I don't know if it was David, someone earlier said, what does this matter? It matters. Kids walk to school there. They are mandated to walk within a mile from Haycock. They are on little streets with no sidewalks, and they get almost hit every day. My son was one of them. There was a kid hit earlier in 2020 right by Longfellow. Cars driving through our area do not care about the people who live here, and we need to calm, not increase the throughput. Okay, that was a lot longer than I expected. I'm going to put everything else in chat, though. Give someone else a chance.
Thank you, Nancy. Judy, are you still on?
I'm still on.
Go ahead.
First of all, I want to thank the last two speakers because they said most of what I wanted to say. Thank you to Paul. His comments are right on target, passionate, and right. David, those streets, Beacon and Casemont that you mentioned, just as the last speaker said, are all in the Haycock School District. There are children walking in all of those neighborhoods. The very first task force that I served on did include suggestions for better pathways and lighting. I've mentioned this any number of times. It never happened. We had to fight for every inch of asphalt path we have between Great Falls and the metro. And so task force, it is your responsibility, and I hope you take it seriously, to balance, as much as we all want to see development up there, whatever development happens, along with the safety and good planning for the area around it. When I served on the last task force, we talked about 1,500 feet from the station and then one larger area out. And David, all these streets are in that grid, and nothing ever happened. So if there's some way you can put teeth in whatever you suggest, I ask you to do it. And finally, Grove Street or Grove Avenue. Founders Row is at the other end of Grove. I know it's in Falls Church City, but Bob, is there planning for, there's going to be gridlock on Grove, not just from the station side, but from the Founders Row side. Have plans been taken into consideration for that?
I don't know what the mitigations are proposed for the Founders Project within the city of Falls Church, but that's something I can work with them or actually just contact them and find out what they're proposing to do there. So yes, I understand the comment, and I've heard about that Founders Row project too. So, but I can check with the city of Falls Church to see what they're doing for mitigation with that development team.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, and we also have one other hand up. Zach, would you like to speak again?
Yeah, that'd be great. Real quick. More of a request than a specific question, but I heard a lot of like, we care about people walking, we care about bikes, we care about traffic, but I didn't hear a lot of proposals on how we would make decisions. So when I think about my work, it's like, we will grant you this approval under these conditions. So for example, a condition might be, we have adequate biking lanes between here and 2 miles out or whatever else. But I would love to hear about what those conditions of approval are before granting approval for like this expansion. So that's where my request to everyone.
Yeah, so really quickly, with the comprehensive plan amendment that we're doing for the two sites we're on at Virginia Tech, there'll be recommendations put forward for bicycle and pedestrian facilities and such. And then Tim's plan as well, that looks at the area around it for bicycle and pedestrians. So that's something that we're still ongoing for putting recommendations in that plan. But the review and approval process goes through Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors, from input from the community groups, from this task force, as well as the other, as well as the community around, as well as part of the stakeholders that you are for these projects. So you're helping us build the recommendations. They will be taken forward to a public hearing process through the Planning Commission and Board. So that's how the approval gets to that perspective. Hopefully that answers the question that you had asked.
Sort of. That was more around the process. Like, I get that you're going to create more plans, but what I want to understand is we will only grant approval if the plan meets these criteria, and us knowing those approval criteria ahead of time.
So this is Mike Garcia. That actually happens at the zoning stage, would be the next level when the applicant actually proposes proffers, and that's a commitment by the applicant to do something, whether that is build a park, build a school, build a travel lane for a condition of getting additional density along those lines. So this is going to set the parameters for what to work within. The next stage is when they put their feet to the fire and actually commit to something. So.
Okay.
Okay. I don't see any more hands up, and I think Nancy's and Zach's are just up from before. So I probably should take advantage of the lull and say, if you want to end this, Brian, it probably makes sense to do.
Yeah, of course. Bob, Chris, Steve, Tim, thank you for your presentation.
Yes, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out and participating. We are copying down the messages in chat. I will send those along to the folks in FC Dot that have presented here tonight.
And also to the task force, could you, because I don't always really get a chance to read all the things in chat.
Yeah, of course.
So that we can all just ponder them.
Yeah, I can forward them along to the task force as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
We'll be posting the recording of this meeting and the slides from the meeting on our meeting webpage. For those of you that have signed up to receive our email updates, I will be forwarding the link to those once we post them. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. My email is brian.boteo@fairfaxcounty.gov. BRYAN.BOTELLO@fairfaxcounty.gov. Hope everyone has a good evening. And thank you for coming
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming and participating.
Thank you.